Hello everyone, Dave here from Ramen Studio again. I just want to start off by saying I went rock climbing this week for the first time since I was about 13. And boy, does nothing instill a sense of confidence in your own upper body strength like rock climbing. I felt so good seeing my 10-year-old nephew do a much better job of upper body strength than I did. And even better, I'm in agony today and I feel like my forearms are actually broken. So today, while I recover from my self-imposed injury, I thought I'd talk through some of the branding I did last year for a company known as Sense My Farm. This was a really fun project last year. Everyone was really happy with the outcome, and I was really happy with the work. Scotty and Ronnie from Sense My Farm were an absolute delight to work with. They had great ideas, they were really keen to work together on a project, and we're all super happy with how the work turned out. Also, there's one thing I want to talk about in the branding process today. It's something that you cannot say no to, but you might not notice yourself. I'll get to that in a bit. Anyway, here it is. Okay, so what is Sense My Farm? Sense My Farm is a collection of tools that interface with an app to give you information from all the different areas of your farm. This can be monitoring water levels across different water tanks, checking the location, vaccination status, and movement of cattle, seeing how much water is in a trough, and eventually they're going to be integrating some stuff like electric fence monitoring and the ability to turn on and off objects from a remote location. This was a really interesting project because I've lived in the city all my life, and as much meat as I eat, I know very little about how a farm functions. This is one of my favorite things about design. I've had a great opportunity over the years that I worked in this industry to learn about some completely different industries. I've been able to learn about asbestos and asbestos remediation. I've learned about aluminium recycling and the pressures on how that works in Australia. And when I was freelancing at different agencies, I was able to learn how to castrate a lamb. And I even got the opportunity to draw how to castrate a lamb. Illustration is a great job. So the guys came to me at the start of last year and they wanted to work on the logo to get started here. This was a really good test to see how we work together. A lot of the time with clients, I try to explain to them that branding is more than just a logo. It's really easy for people to get focused on a logo because that's the most tangible thing they can see at the start. But really, once you get into branding, it's a lot more than just the logo. Branding is how you speak about your product. It's who you choose to speak to your product about. It's the tone of voice you use, and it's the sort of places your brand might pop up. So with Sense My Farm, there was this delicate balance. Do we lean into something that's more organic or something that's more tech? In the end, we looked through a few ideas, we spoke about what we wanted to do with the company, and we decided that technology was the thing we really wanted to focus on here. You can even see with the product photography that I did, we tried to focus on the technical aspects of this and give the product a sort of weightlessness. Now, when the guys came to me, they actually had something that they'd already started on themselves. This is pretty common. A lot of the time people come to you and they've got an idea that they've started working on. Now, normally I would suggest if you're working with a new client, don't say no to this immediately. It might be quite a nascent company. That doesn't mean that the people that are involved in it aren't happy with how things are going. A lot of the time people understand their branding is not as professional as they'd like it to be, but they're still happy with what they've started with. Otherwise, they wouldn't be using it really. You know, a great example of this is I once worked in an agency and we were pitching to Campos Coffee. We were suggesting to them that maybe it was time to rebrand. Their logo had been around for a long time and there was a few sort of technical errors in their actual type. But when we started talking to the team there, they were really set on keeping at least the rosette. Why? Because this is something the original founder had created himself. Doesn't matter if I can come along and technically look at it and say there's a few errors in it. That's their brand identity to them. That's something that they hold close and it's something that they value about the brand. And realistically, apart from designers, who cares? People aren't going to notice those small mistakes unless you point it out to them. So the guys came to me with this branding that they'd done already. And I didn't want to completely scrap everything here. I wanted to take some of the elements in this and the real sort of flavor of it and work with that. This is a good example of someone who's not a designer, what they think is a logo. And I actually think it's quite accurate. Big thing with logos is you don't want them to be too detailed and you want them to read at a very small scale. So one of the key things that the guys have here, which means it's working, is everything's a mono weight line. This is a pretty helpful trick when it comes to branding. If you do something and it's starting to feel a little bit too illustrative and not enough like a logo, I often suggest to people that you stick to one line weight. For some reason, it's like you automatically see that as a logo. When you have lots of varied line weights, it starts looking more like a drawing. So we looked at a few ideas here. We're thinking about something that's a bit more animal driven, or we're thinking about something that's a bit more plant driven. The idea here is that I guess plants are such a shorthand for growth and development that it felt like it made a lot more sense to lean into this. Also, the guys are starting with cattle as their main focus, but over time they want to look at other things like lamb and sheep, whatever else people farm. So if we stuck to one animal, it might be a little bit too restrictive. So deciding on this direction, we started exploring some different ways that we could articulate this. Do we lean into something that's very tech oriented, or do we lean into something that's a little bit more organic here? We looked at a few different options. We looked at warm colors versus these brighter digital colors. And then we finally made our decision on where we wanted to take this. Now with this logo, we knew we were gonna be printing a lot of apparel. So things like shirts, hats, that sort of stuff. If you know your brand is gonna end up in those sort of locations, it's really good to design your logo knowing that it will be able to print. You know, the joke when I was at college used to be, will it embroider? Would you be able to take your super detailed, way too complex logo and put it onto a hat? And normally, no was the answer. So there's a real skill in being able to simplify your logo over time and make sure that it is gonna work at all these different scales. Now, I was very happy with the logo, and so were the guys. But here's the thing you can never count on. Is everyone gonna like it? More importantly, is everyone's partner gonna like it? Or will they see something that's glaring in hindsight? So the guys were happy with the logo. They decided to show their partners. And one of them had a little bit of feedback that was hard to ignore. Sort of stared you right in the face. And I should know because this is something I'm unfortunately way too frequently seeing in my life. One of the client's partners came back to us and said, I like the logo, but don't you think the tree looks just a little bit like a cat's anus? Now, that's quite hard to recover from, particularly when it's quite accurate. So how do we break this? Because we liked the idea, but boy, was that staring me in the face after we'd pointed it out. This ended up being a pretty simple trick. And to be honest, it kind of lends a bit of realism to the tree in the logo. We broke the way the branches were stacked so that they weren't perfectly symmetrical and they had a bit of an offset. The guys were happy with this, and then it meant it was time to start designing other things. With clients who are going to be producing a lot of collateral, I really like to work with them on creating brand guidelines. Here we can start to define what the brand is. We can start thinking about things like what's the personality of the brand, what's the tone of voice, who are we targeting, what's our mission statement, how are we going to get to people? These documents are always really interesting to put together, and they always end up as a really fun collaborative project. I think this is a really good project to do with people. A lot of the times people have a product and they know they want to sell it, but they're not sure how they want to sell it, who they want to sell it to, or how they're going to achieve it. If you start outlining this stuff, things like personality and tone of voice, it almost starts creating a template for everything that you're going to make from there on. This is so incredibly helpful when it comes time to starting to write copy for projects. Now, I'm a bit of a weirdo. I do design, but I also do a lot of copywriting for my clients. I really like language, and it's a fun experiment for me to get to write some of this stuff down and think a little bit more conceptually when it comes to design and marketing. We faced a really interesting demographic here. It's people that might not have a huge amount of trust in digitally based products. People who are much more likely to be responsive to word of mouth and face-to-face interactions. These are people who like to hold something in their hands. And these are people who are more likely to listen to what their friend says than what we say. So with that in mind, a big goal with a lot of our collateral was to have actual feedback from people who'd used the products. We wanted actual testimonials from people who'd had a chance to use the product and seen if it worked or not. Thankfully, one of the people who trialed the products had an incredible experience. We were able to leverage his story and use it in all our collateral. There's a really common thought in marketing. People make an emotional decision and then they rationalize it afterwards. So someone might say, I want those shoes because they're cool. But then if you read about the shoes and oh my God, they've got this brand new rubber technology and they take all the pressure off the soles of your feet, then you can say, oh, actually, that's a good investment. I don't want them just because I want them. I want them because they solve a problem I have. There you go. You've just rationalized a purchase. Well, for these guys, we know they're going to have an emotional response pretty quickly. Either they're on board with tech stuff or they think it's stupid. So having this testimonial from a real person meant that we could lead with an emotional headline, but then we could go into more detailed specs about how this actually worked for them. So we really found this point that our copy could focus on here. How did this product save people time and money? And what did that mean to them as a farmer in terms of what else they could do with their time? Anyway, this was a really fun project to work on. And there's a lot more to speak about with this. Next time, I'm going to be talking about the website. I'm going to be talking about how we produced some pages that really focused on information about the product, and how we created a site that could be focused on sales in the long term and information in the short term. This was a really interesting project. It had a very quick deadline of 3 weeks from conceptual to delivery. The website was a great challenge, and again, it's been a really fun project to work on. I started this page because I wanted to get in touch with people who are interested in working together. This is probably my favorite sort of client to work on. I love working with businesses that are taking their first few steps into the real world. It is such a fun opportunity to define a brand and maybe make someone's first ideas into a really fleshed out functioning product. I've been lucky enough to do this a few times, and I'm going to talk through some other times I've had this chance. If you're out there and you've got your own product and you're looking for someone to work with, I would love the opportunity to work with you. If you're out there and you've done something similar and you want feedback from someone else, I'd love to hear about that too. You can always send me an email at review@ramenstudio.com.au. Send me a link to the work you've done, whether it's a website or if it's your private portfolio. I'd love to talk about it on the channel and explain maybe how I would approach the same problem. Well, that's all from me this time. Until next time, I'll be in agony lying on the couch and probably never rock climbing ever again. Thanks.